Hello and welcome to the Building Podcast. Today we're exploring some of the pressures that can be brought onto one of our projects that can have a really negative impact on both quality and safety. We all know that building is an expensive and time-consuming business, which shouldn't really surprise anyone when you consider the complexity and the one-off nature of our projects. However, this can mean that funders and clients can get understandably frustrated with progress when it's the product of our work and the finished product of our work that they really need. Today's guest is David Forde, who runs his own consultancy offering clerk of works and electrical appointed person services amongst a range of others, and we'll let Dave explain what he actually does. But he's a great person to talk us through some of the examples that the pressures that clients can bring to bear on projects and the consequences that flow from those pressures. So Dave, it's going to be a really interesting podcast, but welcome to the Building Podcast.
Thanks for inviting me.
Dave, it's going to be interesting. What we normally do is we start with allowing you to sort of explain what your role is in your business and the sort of things that your business does. And I think that's going to be really important for today's conversation because you have a really specialist and highly professional role on some of these large projects that we're going to be looking at.
Yeah. Hello, my name's Dave Forde. I'm a chartered construction consultant and I've got my own chartered construction consultancy. So I started off as a spark, but my career's taken me everywhere. I've moved across all different sectors and I've done an awful lot of property developing on the side as well. So apart from working on major infrastructure projects such as the Olympics, I've done 7 years on Crossrail, a couple of years on HS2 and numerous other prestige projects in England, London and around the world. Currently, so now what I do, I've got my own consultancy and I provide support to either construction companies who are trying to break into the world of tier one contracting, which, as we know, is a super ruthless endeavour, not for the faint-hearted. Why they would ever want to break into that, I don't bother asking them, but that's what they pay me for, so help them.
Okay. It's a tough world. It's certainly a tough world being a tier one.
It is, yeah. I do a lot of work with property developers. That could be either people who are already very good at it and want to move into the world of prime luxury development. Now, when you get to that level, you're not so much dealing with a construction company, you're dealing with utterly ruthless, switched on businessmen and women who just so happen to have a construction company attached to it, so you're playing for big stakes there. Okay. Or I work right down at the very, without wishing to sound rude, lower end of the sector. That's the SME.
Let's say smaller end, because I think some of those SMEs are really very capable and confident, and actually that's what the industry relies on, isn't it, to deliver most of
Well, yeah, that's the thing. They stick to what they're good at and they're excellent at it. But I tend to work with the newer people who are just starting off for the first time.
Right.
And it's all done with a handshake with a builder and give us 20 grand, it's 100 grand, give us 20 grand cash up front and we'll start on Monday. And then, yeah, right, and that's where I come in and I say, no, just stop. That's not how it's done. I try to maintain a full-time role as well on projects. And the reason for that is because I need to be around people who are at the top of the industry. I need to make sure that my peer group is the top set of professionals so that I maintain my skills. And with that and my MEP background, for about the last 10 years, I've undertaken the role of SAP, which is an electrically based safety role, senior authorised person. Basically, on a project, I run the permit office. Anything to do with live electricity falls within my remit. Nothing gets switched on without my say-so. And if it all goes wrong, I'm the one standing in the dock explaining to the judge, not the company, not the client, not the person who caused it, me personally,
Yeah, I mean that's really, it's a fundamentally important role for health and safety, that SAP. I mean, they appear on all projects with significant electrical infrastructure, and electricity is one of those things that people don't understand particularly well because it can kill you if you get it wrong. And so the SAP, understandably, is the man or woman who's personally liable for the implementation of those safety systems and procedures on site around it. So really important role to fulfill, and one that generally requires an enormous amount of experience because you've got a lot of competing pressures on an SAP, which I'm sure we'll have a talk about as we go through some of the examples I know we're going to be touching on.
Yeah, definitely.
So Dave, I mean, your consultancy allows you to do all sorts of things with a wide variety of different clients and customers that you have. But we're going to start by looking at a recent large project where a tier one contractor is in charge and putting a bit of pressure on the team to get the delivery programs up. And in your opinion, being the person in charge of the health and safety on the SAP is being a bit unrealistic on what can be done. Do you want to just describe the setup and your role on that site? And clearly, we're not going to mention any names or locations.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, let's just say it was in London, and it was a big mixed use development. And the company I worked for, they were relatively new to this. This was probably the biggest project they'd ever done, and we were working for an extremely hard-bitten, ruthless, very well-known tier one contractor who are used to getting their own way and delivering at all costs. Right, so
Okay. So you're working for the electrical subcontractor here. You've been appointed by the electrical or the MEP subcontractor to the tier one.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, they were the tier one MEP contractor underneath the client.
Brilliant. Okay. And what's your role for this for the mechanical electrical contractor?
I was the senior authorised person on that project.
Right. So you're the person effectively who's been made responsible for the health and safety of that site as far as electrical infrastructure goes.
Yeah, the client know that they've got a responsibility to keep everyone safe. They insist that the electrical contractor will have a permit office there and will have an SAP there. Truth be told, they don't really want it, but because it's an additional, quite a large additional cost, but they know there's got to be someone there because they're not specialised.
Yeah.
The company I work for, not just this company, most companies don't really want someone now because it's an additional cost, but they need someone now to take the fall if it goes wrong, but really someone who knows what they're doing, who's going to have the authority to allow work to continue, but in a safe manner. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah. I mean, that's a statutory duty on the clients and on the main contractors under a whole raft of legislation, not least the CDM legislation, placing the responsibility on the client. So it sounds as though the ultimate client was putting the appropriate pressure on the main contractor to put an SAP in position.
That they were, yeah.
Yeah. So that's good news, and so that they're fulfilling their duty under the CDM regulations as a start of a 10. Do you want to sort of explain some of the pressures that were then coming through from the main contractor to sort of say, to try and put into context some of the conversations we're about to have on the consequences of that?
All right. So the way they see it, they've complied with all their obligations, legal obligations. They've covered themselves. They've got this person in this position, right? However, being an SAP is a lonely place. You find yourself sitting in the canteen on your own a lot, right?
Yeah.
Because
you're Mr. No, that's the problem.
you're Mr. No, exactly. The client doesn't want you to stop the work. Your project manager certainly doesn't want you to stop the work, and the blokes always thinking, this bloke is out to get me. Like, if he catches me doing something, I'm down the road and all that. And he's constantly pulling me up on these stupid little things. But they're not stupid little things. One, they're the law. Two, it's good practice. Three, it's to save your life, mate. Like, no matter how stupid you think they are. And four, it's to protect me.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, there was a lot of money on this project. The project value was in the hundreds of millions, and
Right.
The client just wanted work to go ahead full speed, 100 mile an hour, no matter what. And of course, I'm now saying no. This can't happen before this, and this is in place, you know. And I'm just not going to budge. And there's a reason for that. And it's not about the money. It's not about anything. It's I've been doing this. I don't know, 43 years, I think. And during that time, I mean, I started in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, it's a completely different world then. But
It is, yeah.
Throughout my career, I've been on 6 separate projects where people have been killed. And me, myself, I've been seriously injured several times. I've been hospitalised several times. And the amount of minor injuries I've had, I don't know, they're in the hundreds. So
Yeah.
I'm not budging. I don't care that these people want to make money, right? I've been recruited to this role because I'm good at it. I know what I'm doing. I was one of them blokes on the tools.
Yeah, yeah.
Difference was when I was on the tools, there was no one looking out for me. Things
Yeah.
have changed now, you know. So I'm the barrier between commercial and program pressure and the safety of the blokes.
Yeah. And we know that safety should trump and win every time, and that's
Always.
that's one of the challenges you've got. So Dave, just going back a bit, it sounds to me as though the programming and planning on this project had gone completely, you know, AWOL. It had gone completely. There was no planning or programming. If you're being pressurized to do things in out of sequence and out of order, would that be fair to say?
Well, what happened was the company I worked for, they were relatively new in tier one contracting, if we want to call it the big league, you know, and their eyes were wide with pound notes dangling in front of them. Listen,
Yeah,
just this is all new.
Comes with consequences, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they're used to doing little £500,000 jobs, schools, hospitals. All of a sudden, they're on this one. I don't know what it was, 30, 40, 50 million or something. And they're just going to bend over for the client. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for the main contractor. Well, for the main contractor, presumably, isn't it?
The main contractor. So in the tender negotiations, yeah, sure, there was a great big, very well thought out logical program. And day one, when it started, the program went like that. You know.
Yeah.
And we all know what happens. There's the QA paperwork doesn't get signed. Don't worry, just carry on. We'll do it after. You know what I mean? And that ain't quite right. Yeah, no one's going to see it. It's above the ceiling, and it's underneath the floor. And there was all that going on. You know.
Yeah. So were you acting as a clerk of works on this project as well, or were you sort of falling into that role?
I fell into it because really there wasn't one.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. And you would expect competent tradesmen to really not need a clerk of works if they're any good. But again, this was another thing. There was cheap labour on there, you know.
Yep.
It was, if you could stand up and breathe and carry a tool, you could have a job, you know. So really, just for my own benefit, I took it upon myself to take on the unofficial clerk of works role.
Yeah. Well, let's unpack a bit of some of the real consequences of these pressures that you're under. So, and you know, we talked about a lack of time. So the main contractor's program's gone all over the place. Program times inevitably slip when that happens because there's, you know, the consequence of that. People are suddenly realizing there's jobs on the program that need to be done, as you described. You have to do something before something else can happen.
Yeah.
What does that mean in terms of program? Does that mean that you've got people working all over the site? You've got people working in out of order, out of sequence, and you haven't got the right numbers in the right places? Is that?
Yeah, you'll have one part of the project. You won't have enough people in there. You go to another part, and it's so crammed with people, they're all working on top of each other, and it's the law of diminishing returns.
Oh yeah,
Apart from the fact that it's dangerous having
yeah,
all these blokes climbing all over each other. And see, we'd go to the weekly interface meeting, and there'd be a new 2 week look ahead brought out, and we'd walk out. Literally, we would walk out of there, and before we got back to our office, that had just gone out the window. That was just there to keep the client quiet in the meeting, and then it was snatching at anything, any bit of work that could be done anywhere that the materials happened to be there on that day, or there happened to be enough blokes to pull this massive cable, that'd get done regardless of whether the program said it had to be done or not.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
chaos, just chaos.
So we're talking about chaos when we've got some rather dangerous electrical connections, which, yeah, can, as you say, can be fatal on.
You got some serious HV voltage there, 27 kV and all
Yeah,
that. That was live at the time, because you couldn't shut the train station
train
off.
station down. So live
Mm,
working, yeah, live electrics on site as well. So really
yeah.
quite dangerous.
Mm.
So I mean, I'm quite interested in the programming because for me, programming on sites actually dictate they're the main control document for a lot of what we do, and resourcing those programs, making sure they're accurate, and then resourcing them is a key management tool for making sure that these programs, the projects are delivered on time and effectively to budget and the right quality. So the reprogramming, it sounds like, never happened.
No, it never happens. But again, that comes down to the root cause of that was the inexperience of the management, the inability of the project manager, senior project manager, and even the partners of the company to push back
Yeah. So,
against the main
and
contractor.
this is your electrical company. They just hadn't got the experience to push back. It wasn't the main contractor.
They hadn't got the experience, and they were willing. The firm we dealt with, they were just pure bullies back
Yeah.
from the 70s. Their
Yeah.
method of management was shouting, swearing, threatening, constant. I was constantly being threatened with the sack, nearly every single day. And I just used to laugh and I'd say, mate, it's not a threat. It's not a threat. Let me go. I'll be glad. I'll happily go. You
Yeah. Yeah.
know. Yeah, yeah. It just don't work with me. I'm not listening. You know what I mean? I was recruited to do a job, but it would work on the others. So that's where it all went wrong. The senior management, there's pressure there. Someone has to own that pressure. They should push back,
Yeah.
right? Instead, they took it and they passed it down to the team on site.
Yeah.
That's where it all went wrong.
Yeah. And so you've got your tier one subcontractor accepting unreasonable pressures and unreasonable demands from a demanding main contractor,
Yeah,
and then that inexperienced tier one MEP contractor who's accepted these unreasonable demands, making even then having to make those demands on their own staff and their own teams, and
yeah.
presumably those teams weren't all direct employees; they were subcontractors as well to bring these things off and make these things happen.
Well, they were all subbies. So what happens? You had a high turnover of staff,
Yep,
because blokes are saying, no thanks, I just don't need this.
don't need the hassle. Yeah,
Yeah, but they sub certain packages out, and again they'd made the classic mistake. They'd taken the cheapest quote.
yeah, yeah,
Everything they'd taken was the cheapest.
yeah, yeah.
So I don't know how they scored the tenders. There must have just been one metric that they scored it on, price.
Price. Yeah,
So now you're dealing with these unskilled slash semi-skilled subcontractors, and because they've gone in so cheap, they haven't got the prelims to have
yeah,
a
yeah,
sufficient amount of management. So their blokes are not being managed properly. Their blokes ain't that good anyway, you know. And then everything's changing every day. So there was no stakeholder management there. This
Yeah.
poor subcontractor, tier 3 or tier 4, by the time it's got down to the
Yeah. Yeah.
bottom,
Yeah.
there's no money in it for them, there's no resources, it's just a load of abuse and there's just a load of pressure. And they're saying, it ain't our fault. Every single day you're changing what you want,
Yeah.
and that goes back up the chain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why did our management allow this? Why didn't they hold their own in the meetings with the client? And
Yeah.
again, it's lack of experience and the dangling of the carrot and more money.
Yeah. That's this project's in the recent past, but we've had the Building Safety Act has been fully enacted now, and actually, it sounds as though if the act was being followed by the main contractor, they'd have to deem that this subcontractor, this tier one MEP contractor, would not be competent in the eyes of the act in doing in carrying out this work, and so they would never have
This
got the project.
the Building Safety Act came in just towards the end of this
Yeah.
project, so it didn't class.
Yeah.
We worked under the existing legislation. If it was today, there is no way that the company I work for could say they'd done their due diligence and these tier 2 and tier 3 subcontractors were able to demonstrate competency. I mean, just one day I was bored that I had a look at their training matrix and competency matrix. They were at least 2/3 of them unskilled.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Yeah. Cheap
So,
labour.
so cheap labour. So go on then, Dave. You're the man responsible for. You've taken on the clerk of works role. You got the SAP, the senior authorised person for health and safety there. What sort of calibre of Sparkies would you expect to see installing on that site? It's a large, high profile project. What sort of the calibre of Sparkies would you expect to see there, rather than well, just tell me what would you
Well,
expect?
if we go back to the days when everyone would have been a JRB company and electrician, the JRB said there had to be at least 4 fully qualified sparks to 1 unskilled spark. That was the ratio.
Yeah.
That's all changed, and I mean we could do an entire podcast about the lack of apprenticeships, the skills shortages,
Yeah.
the mass influx of cheap labour that was not because the building industry is this wonderful, diverse, loving, multicultural industry. They love exploiting cheap labour from poor countries. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? They're like junkie. They're hooked on it. They just have to have it. So, but anyway, what I would expect to see now, if I'd taken that job on, it was my company. I'd look at it. I'd look at the wage rates around, and I'd think I need at an absolute minimum here 2/3 of my blokes to be fully qualified. You
Yeah.
know, and that
So
includes coming with all the additional tickets as well, the PASMA, the IPAF, the testing, the triple STS, the SMSTS. Now with the thing about CSCS cards and grandfather rights gone, you've got to have all your site management, MVQ level 6.
yeah.
That's at a minimum, to be commercially competitive. Unfortunately, in these days, you got to take on some semi-skilled, unskilled labour, right?
Yeah.
But I would say at a ratio of sort of 2 to 1, and that's at a minimum.
Yeah. Yeah. And so actually your two, so let's just make the listeners clear. So that's your two apprentice qualified, fully qualified electricians,
Yeah,
with the tickets that they need in addition to that for the roles that have been carried out,
yeah,
to every one unqualified but electrically trained individual who could be carrying out various things which don't require a fully qualified electrician.
yeah. For me, that would be a minimum. In an ideal world, you want everyone fully qualified. I just
Yeah,
don't
but
think there's enough people. It's not.
yeah, I mean, we have to balance the availability of staff to the quality to the program, don't we?
Yeah,
That's the challenge we have. And I mean, you've got a view of the London market, which is probably as good as anybody's. And you're saying that actually most of these large projects are having to take on a high proportion of unqualified and unskilled electricians.
Every single project I go on, I would say the majority of people on there are either unskilled or semi-skilled. Fully
Yeah,
qualified people. You just touched on some in there, apprentice trained electricians. There's a lot of blokes who haven't done a full apprenticeship, but they've got off their backside. They've gone to night school and they've paid for their own education. To me, that's good enough. That's it's not their fault that the apprenticeships weren't there when they were
no,
16 years old. But yeah, but now everywhere I go, it doesn't matter where you go. I mean, even Crossrail, the vast majority of people on there were, that they were from abroad and they were semi-skilled or unskilled.
yeah. I mean, it's we all know running projects. If you're going to bring in a low level of or a low level of capability, you need to have the processes in place to make sure that what's actually finished up with is right and of the quality that's required. So it is possible to use semi-skilled people, but you have to have the processes and the check off and the sign off and the commissioning that then can demonstrate that actually what they've done, and generally it takes a lot longer for them to do it, is at the right standard. So it's a balance, isn't it, between the program, the quality, and the people.
It is. No, you're right. You don't have to have the best team in the world as long as you've got sort of governance procedures
Yeah,
and a QA process that will make sure that work that might have taken a bit longer, as long as it's been done correctly, that's fine. But when you're in an environment where you've got a main contractor breathing down your neck, pushing, 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 you
yeah,
know, if anyone puts their hand up like me and goes, "Nah, you're all in dreamland." Like, I ain't turning that on so you can move to the next stage. But here, look, here's all the pictures I've taken. Look, 90% of it needs to be ripped out. Right.
yeah,
I would
yeah,
all of a sudden find myself surplus to requirements on
yeah,
that project.
yeah,
Cheers, mate. You've done really well. As it goes, we don't need you anymore. We're
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about there's 3 years what left on it. No, it's all right. And everyone feels that pressure. So
yeah.
people are under pressure to either overlook stuff or to purposely forge quality assurance documentation.
Yeah, well, that's now we saw that happen at Grenfell, where certificates were forged, and the
Exactly.
consequences are really onerous. We're
Mm,
yet to see the prosecutions flow from Grenfell, but the talk on the street is there's going to be some significant prosecutions flowing from that, probably next year now. But there
I
are
hope
were
so.
forgeries there that actually caused you could directly relate to a significant cause of the deaths that we had at Grenfell. So do people not understand the risks they're taking by forging these certificates?
A lot of them don't. Um, uh, and that's for various reasons. They either don't understand. There's a culture of, oh, that QA stuff is like that health and safety stuff. It's just a tick box culture. Just tick it all. It don't matter. No one cares. No one will ever look at it. But there's also, we live in, there's a lot of economic pressure at the moment. Extortionate cost of living, nothing but doom and gloom in the news about higher taxes, job losses. People have got massive mortgages that,
Yeah,
they're treading water financially. They need that job, right?
yeah,
Even if they know it's so wrong, they know if they don't do what they're told, cheers, mate, we don't need you. You'll be replaced in the morning by someone who will. And unfortunately, this is the truth of what happens.
yeah. So I mean, I was going to come on to the financial consequences, but I mean, if you're, presumably if you've got a tough main contractor on site and the work's not being done, then your employer, the mechanical and electrical contractor's not being paid to do his job because the results aren't there, and therefore there's a risk that the supply chain and the blokes on site are not going to get paid as well. Was that happening?
Um, Due to my company's inability to deal with a client and the pressure that rolled down onto the tier 3 subcontractors, and they were just throwing in any old rubbish just to show progress. And the client, they had a third party company who would come round. They were working on behalf of the sorry, the main contractor
Yeah.
had a third party company who were working on behalf of the client who would come round and do quality checks, and they were constantly pulling up stuff, right, that
Yep.
required reworks to be done. So our company would say to the subby, well, you got to do it at your own cost. And they say, well, I ain't got, because you cut my tender to the bone, I haven't got the money to pay men to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we would do it, but just take it out of his next payment application,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
meant that now he's got to let blokes go
Yeah.
because he can't afford to pay them. So now he's even less resourced. So he's
Yeah. Yeah.
even less capable of doing the
It's a
next bit.
vicious
And
circle, isn't it?
it was just a vicious circle, and we would go into the client interface meetings, and this will be brought up and it'd be shouting and swearing, and we'd blame everything on the subby, and then we'd have our interface meeting with the subby, and we'd blame everything on the client for pushing us, and I don't know what meetings the subby had with his management. I dread to think, but it was just a disaster, and you had this constant turnover of stuff. So even if you did get new decent blokes there, they'd turn up and they'd go, well, what's this? This just doesn't make any sense. Who done
Yeah.
this? Like, look at the
Yeah.
drawings, but that should be over there. What's going on here? Don't worry about it, mate. Hurry up. This has got to be done. And that's
it,
where
it,
we were.
it's a real risk. I mean, we'll come on to the consequences of design, but in terms of money, if you're not being paid, if the money's not flowing, do you see people? I'm presuming there must have been some mental health issues, because if they're not forging signatures on certificates, then you're not going to do that lightly. Presumably you're under some mental pressure at that point, or some stress to be
You
able
know,
to keep that going.
mental health is a big topic in construction these days now. The mental health, blokes were under real pressure. They knew what they were doing were wrong, and they knew that, one, they were being pressured to do this.
Yeah.
Two, if it come on top, the company would throw them under the bus and they
Yeah.
would be gone, right? But again, they need this job here today, right?
Yeah.
They're going to do it. And so you're probably going home, you're thinking about it at night, thinking, I hope that Dave geezer ain't, that SAP geezer ain't, don't come round find this, because he's bang on it, that bloke, you know what I mean? Like, and I'll be down the road, and and you're coming to work in the morning, and has anyone said anything? No, they haven't. Like, and that was everywhere. There was a hell of a lot of people out there. I know for a fact that a lot of electrical test results are forged. I know that from my career, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Especially on big projects where it's so repetitive.
Yeah.
If let's say you're doing flats, there's 500 flats in a block, and they're all 2 bedroom, and you're testing on a price. Once you've tested 100 of them, and the results are more or less all exactly the same, right? The next 400, I absolutely guarantee you, ain't going to be tested. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? There'll be another 400 set of test results, that's for sure. And they'll vary slightly, you know what I mean? But they'll all be, the whole 500 will all be more or less the same.
Yeah.
So
So
you've
the
got all
reason we're
that
doing
going
the
on.
testing, the reason we're doing the testing is to pick that 1 in 500 out that's unsafe, isn't it?
Yeah, and so you got blokes pressured to, it's like, listen, if you don't sign this off, they won't allow us to start the next floor, right? So
Yeah.
just sign it off for now. Let's get started. That will trigger another payment. Then we'll drop back and we'll sort them issues out, right? But of course, you never drop back and sort them out. What's it matter? Someone's already signed it. If it's found to be wrong in the future, well, it's him who's going to get the blame for it.
Yeah.
That's the culture. that puts pressure on people.
Yeah. No, and entirely untenable. I mean, it's a lack of coordination. And as always, it's the individual on the tools who's got to make the decisions and actually bear the consequences of quite a lot of those cock ups further up the stream.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things which you sort of touched on there is design issues. So it sounds like the design is not being installed as per design, and so the designer's design is not being met on site. Is nobody checking that to make sure that the cables are in the right locations and in the right places, or is that being left up to your QA controls that isn't really being installed? They're relying on the
Well,
commissioning certificates.
that's left down to the supervisor. Now he's caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. He's got an incompetent workforce, so a lot of the time they're not capable of installing it properly, right? But they've installed something,
Yeah.
and it's sort of roughly where it should be. And a lot of it's inaccessible. No one can get up there to check. You know what I mean? A lot of it you can't see. The ceilings are up. So he's signing that off. If you've got a good T&C manager, they're going to find that. But again, what sort of pressures are they under as well to keep their job? But now with the Building Safety Act, as you know, I'm no expert on it. I've tried to educate myself on it. You can't just do this. Listen, the design says it should be there. That don't really work. We'll move it over here. You know, you're not allowed to do that.
No.
So if people are going to abide by this is going to bring out. You've got to have a change control process. You've got to go to the designer, send them an RFI, explain what the issue is, propose a solution. If they're happy with it, go ahead. But you can't just do what you want and give a load of red line drawings at the end of the project.
No, so the RFI is a request for information, and you're absolutely right. The designer who's responsible for design will have to sign off that and check it as it fits within his holistic design. The challenge you're facing though is if your company is, or the spark is on the site doing changes on site without getting those requests for information signed off, they are effectively taking on the design liability for what's going on. And that's a really dangerous place to be, because at the end of the day, somebody has to sign off personally to say that it's been designed it's designed and been installed in accordance with the drawings. Two separate people generally, but it's quite an onerous position to take if then subsequently a problem is found.
Well, it is, and especially if the person doing that is not based on site. If you're a company who's got multiple projects all around the country, maybe you can go and visit each one once or twice, you know. But it's going to come to the end of the project where there's a whole heap of assurance documentation that needs to be given to the client before you finally get paid. You know, and if you're sitting in the head office where everyone there, the directors of the company, your line manager and all that, you've got to sign this stuff, you know, otherwise you don't have a job. Now you can raise, so what I did, I learned this, someone taught me this years and years ago. I've been really lucky throughout my career. I've worked with fantastic men and women who've taught me things. So someone said to me, if you're ever put in that position, just go, yeah, sure, fine. Just can you email it to me, please? Like that you want me to change, you want me to deviate from the
design.
assured design. Yeah, that's all. Just maybe a little sketch with it and I'll do it. No problem. You know, of course, they don't want to do that, do they? You know?
No, they don't want to have their neck on the block because there's a change control process in place. I mean, this is particularly on the large blocks of flats that you're talking about. This is where the golden thread and the electronic mechanism recording it under the Act really play a part. But it does require, as we sort of alluded to, the speed of that process has to be absolutely red hot if you're going to keep your electricians and your sparkies efficient and productive on site. And that's part of the challenge we all face on these large projects.
And there's also still a prevailing attitude of listen, we'll do it. We'll get so much put in that if anyone pulls it up, they're not going to make us change it because it'll put the project back so much. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
that attitude still prevails, and that comes down to ignorance of. But you quite obviously don't understand the law. You know,
yeah. And ignorance of
things
the law is no defence.
things have changed. When I started, we used to go to work wearing trainers and shorts. You could drink a can of beer on the
Yeah, yeah,
scaffold, smoke and all that, and basically do what you want as long as it all got done and everyone got paid. Happy days. That's that's another world we're talking about, you know. But a lot of people are still stuck in that mindset. But it'll take a couple of high-profile prosecutions, and this stuff will filter down.
yeah. I mean, I think it's, we're now we've been a year through the grace period on the Building Safety Act. You'd expect some prosecutions to flow fairly quickly if there is a problem now. So that's what you're right. Perhaps a few high-profile prosecutions of some significant individuals and significant businesses, and then we'll all start sitting up to take account of it.
Yeah,
But it's and you, I suppose, with a commercial hat on, you'd hope that it's not going to add to the cost of it, because the cost of your MEP contractor on that site running a project like that, when a lot of the work's being rehashed and reworked, you're working out a sequence, the productivity of the men and women delivering it isn't up to much. If you can get that design done up front and plan them with competent people throughout the business, which is what we now have to sign up to, you've got a chance of doing this far more efficiently and effectively. And so the costs of doing that should actually work out and would hopefully be more than repaid by the efficiency of the people on site.
it usually does if you know, when I do my consulting with my property developing clients, I say, look, the battle is won, fought, and lost in the pre-construction phase. If you've got it
Mm.
right there, you've already made your money. Now, what you need to do during the delivery is protect that money and at the end collect it. You know,
Yeah,
and it's yeah. MEP is not cheap these days, you know. A little bit of rework, everything is 5, 10,
yeah, yeah,
25 grand. So I think once the commercial people cotton onto this, things might change. But I need to stress, it's not just about the money, it's about the pure brain damage of having a like, oh no, what's happened there? How did this happen?
yeah, yeah,
What do we need to do? Oh, we need to go all the way. Oh no, you're joking. What's that mean? Right, that means everything's got to be ripped out. It's the shouting, the arguing, the meetings, the emails, the
yeah.
blaming, the
It's the
trying.
blame game, isn't it? Who's responsible for it? Because
Yeah,
at that level, it's the individuals, isn't it? It's almost one against another, isn't it? And that's the real
exactly.
damage that can be done.
Yeah,
Yeah, really challenge. Well, look, Dave, I'm mindful of the time. We've had a really good run through a sort of a significant job you've been involved in, and you're saying this is probably, if not endemic, but very common within some of the larger projects within the UK, well, within the London certainly.
yeah,
Um, I mean, sort of final few questions. Is there, what's the answer? If we've got an area where we've got unqualified and unskilled people and unskilled companies. Actually, I think that's probably where some of this actually started. Is that's an
yeah,
unskilled company
yeah,
uh, sitting in a very sharp commercial environment, trying to deliver a really high quality and really quite dangerous, if it's done wrong, infrastructure. And it sounds though everything's going wrong. And I think there was a bit of research that said 80% of accidents generally start in an office somewhere, that's design or commercial office.
right.
Well, what do we think the answer is to, how would you like to sort of reset the industry so that these sort of problems don't arise? It's a massive question, but
Well,
not gonna expect an easy answer. But there must be two or three things that you might what. Well, look at it a different way. What signifies a successful job when you land on when you're invited to go and work on a job? What are the signposts you look for to think it's going to be a relatively straightforward and easy, successful job?
oh, yeah, that's Well, I don't know if I've ever been on a straightforward, relatively easy, successful job. I mean,
It sounds like you're a bad penny, Dave. The last person we want on our jobs is Dave because he's going to
look,
make it.
I worked on Crossrail for 7 years. That was £5 billion over budget and 3 years late, But it was
Yeah,
brilliant. We had active resources. But the thing is, look, just a couple of main points. With construction, there is a very, very low bar to entry, right?
yeah,
Anyone, anyone today a teacher, a factory worker, a housewife, security guard can just right at this minute say, do you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to get in a building game and just go and buy an old van, get some ladders, go to the car boot sale, buy a load of second-hand tools and drills, put an advert up in the newsagent window, all building work undertaken, no job too small, get a pay-as-you-go SIM card and get a Gmail email address, and you're up and running. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
You got, but
That's mostly the domestic sector now, isn't it? The
yeah,
buildings,
yeah,
we would hope if the prosecutions flow, then the Building Safety Act for commercial work
yeah, I hope so. But
is going to
what,
require that. And even domestic work requires a building certificate, requires competent people to sign off because otherwise building control won't let them sign off.
yeah, but what I was trying to get at is there is a low bar to entry, and these
Yeah,
people inevitably filter their way up into different sectors of the industry. There's a massive skill shortage. Everyone knows that, right?
yeah, yeah. Well,
Sometimes it just,
particularly electricians, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
everything's going electrical, and there aren't enough electricians.
exactly. Nowhere near. Sometimes you just got to take what you can get, work with what you got. But the main problem I see is this commercial environment of competitive tendering and the cheapest bid wins, because I, throughout my career, have worked for numerous, with numerous of the big name tier one contractors, and their business model, and it's no secret, and everyone knows, is to get the job done by not paying the subcontractors, right? Yeah, you look at their balance sheets. Some of them they turn over £2 billion a year on a 1% profit margin. That wouldn't even pay for their prelims and their office staff, right? All the
Yeah,
rest comes from not paying subcontractors, and the consequences of that are devastating. Every week we read in the construction publications, this company's gone bust, this one's gone under, this one went under owing £50 million in retention to 100 different companies. This supplier didn't get 70 grand, The ripple effect is
yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
devastating. But they make no bones about it at all, right?
Yeah,
Um,
but
ev-
a project bank account might be one of the answers to that, and that would be it would protect
now
the funder and the ultimate client if a project bank account was in that position.
that I think project bank accounts are excellent things, and I think they should be more widely used. I always encourage my smaller clients to look into them. It gives everyone certainty they're going to get paid. It stops all the shenanigans,
Yeah,
and ultimately, building can be very, very hard. You're out in all weathers, it's cold, you're self-employed, you've got to go to work when you're sick, when you're injured, you can get hurt. But as long as you can get your money every Friday, people are willing to put up with that.
yeah,
They just accept that it's not an easy thing. But when you start messing with people's money, it's totally different. Project bank accounts are an excellent thing. I think to overcome this skill shortage, we need to make construction a more attractive
yeah,
career.
yeah,
It needs to be promoted more in schools. And we're at this real turning point now where we've got all the technology coming in and the off-site manufacturing, modern methods of construction. Now, all the way through my career, things have been changing, but not at this pace.
yeah,
Let's say we go back. I remember when I worked on Crossrail in 2016. BIM was out there at the time, but we weren't using it. But it was mandatory on there, so we all had to do mandatory BIM training. So the point is, everyone who worked there was in my team was in their 50s and older. If you would have got a kid who's 21 but who's a BIM expert, he's at that table. He
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
have to put in the 20, 30 years experience to get to that table. So youngsters now, they've got real opportunity. All this stuff, Revit, 4D modelling and 5D modelling and all this fantastic stuff. We need to be getting into schools and saying to them, listen, this is your place, not making TikTok videos,
Yeah, yeah.
working on these multi-billion-pound
Yeah,
engineering
yeah.
projects.
And it's a well-paid industry as well. I mean, it's the other thing about construction. We do put up with, you described some really terrible working conditions, but actually, as a sector, we're relatively well paid, compared to many other sectors. And so
Yeah,
it should be an attractive sector to recruit into.
yeah. I see the government are promising to create 2 million new jobs in renewables, right? That's just a throwaway comment, like we're going to build 1.5 million houses. Like there's no substance behind it. But let's say we are going to create 2 million jobs in renewables. Great, right? Tell me what these jobs are. Tell me the job titles. Tell me what they're going to pay. Tell me what skills you need. Is there a qualification for this? If this is true, let's get it rolled out there. Let's get these people into
Yeah,
the
yeah.
industry.
So renewables is actually something I do know a little bit about, having been involved in all sorts of things. Thankfully, it's not 2 million people we need to find, but it is
Right.
there is quite a lot of work going into exactly those things you're describing.
Okay, good.
What are the routes we have into the industry? What are the competencies we need? What are the job descriptions we need? And the industry, the renewables industry, is actually doing quite a lot of work to try and bring that to fruition for exactly the reasons you're describing. You need without that definition, you're not going to bring anybody in.
Yeah.
It's just a statement given by some politicians
Mhm.
without any ability to back it up. But actually, in the renewable sector, we are very busily trying to work our way through some of those challenges that you described.
Okay, good.
So there's some hope for us yet. I mean, David, it's we've got project bank accounts. We've got to try and get into the schools, and we've got to try and get those sorted out.
Yeah.
Um, the Building Safety Act also talks about competent organisations. How would you describe, if you're a client or looking at a main contractor, or a main contractor looking at an MEP, mechanical electrical contractor? What would your signals be? What would your signpost be to say this organisation is competent?
Well, really, now you got to look at. I think the term is organisational capacity. I know
That's
that
right. Yeah.
comes from the CDM regs as well, and so that's going to be what's their competency matrix, not just what projects have they done. That's not good enough. They've delivered £100 million project. That doesn't tell me anything. Is this person skilled? Are they qualified? Have they got the resources? Have they got a proper company health and safety policy? They're designers. Are they people who just picked it up as they went along, or have they actually got qualifications and PI insurance they can demonstrate to me? You know, that's something. It's going to really put a big obligation on people because there's a lot of the smaller sort of tier two subcontractors. They're just blokes who they were on the tools and they thought, well, I'm
Yeah.
earning £1,000 a week here, but how much is my governor earning? I reckon I could do what he does. They've got 10 of their mates together. They've took work on a price. They've won another job. They've built it up. They've built a bit of a firm. They're making money. They're getting it done. They're working 7 days a week. But if you were to now take them and give them a framework and say, look, this is what the Building Safety Act assumes you should have as a competent contractor, a lot of that they're not going to have. So
No.
what I
No.
think, and that's not their fault because
Well,
what
they've got to realise they need it, don't they?
yeah,
That's the
what they're
challenge.
good at is working. You know,
Yeah.
all this legislation and they've never needed it, and no one's ever explained it to them. So there needs a massive push now. It needs a mindset change. I mean, I remember if we go back to trying to think now. I don't know. Let's say the late 90s when sort of they tried to make proper efforts about health and safety. People weren't interested. It was just a tick box culture,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of resistance from the blokes on site. But I watched the transition through the 2000s and from
Yeah.
2010 onwards when all the top RICS, REBA, COB, ICE, and all that was there was a constant, persistent message,
It
and
was. Yeah.
that actually transformed. It was a complete mindset change that filtered down to
Yeah.
all the blokes on site who see now that what we do is dangerous,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we need to be protected. And it's not a tick box thing. It's about going home safe. And it's about me not being abused by my greedy employer who's willing to risk my health and safety for money in his bank account. That took a long time, but
Yeah.
it's in there now, it's embedded. It's a mindset change.
It
So
is.
with this Building Safety Act, it's about all contractors having to be competent, being able to demonstrate competence, and the realisation that there's a cost attached to this, right?
Yeah.
That's what we need. We need to get the processes out now. This is a mindset change. This isn't optional anymore. This is the minimum you have
Right.
to meet if
It's
you want to
statute.
work here. Yeah,
It's the
exactly.
law. It's the law. And
Exactly.
actually, if we get ourselves better organized and with better skills, there's a chance we'll be more productive and our costs will come down.
That's very
You
true
know,
as well, isn't it?
you
Yeah,
talk about the project you've just described, it must be costing somebody an enormous amount of money, which is completely wasted and unrecoverable. And it's not,
totally.
and not just the blokes as well. I mean, that's, but no, I mean, I think so. So we've got project bank accounts, we've got skilling up of people, and we've got
Yeah.
making sure that organisations are competent. If we get that done, then no small
I,
feat.
I bring back the clerk of works as well.
Yeah,
When I first started, every job had a clerk of works. Somewhere along the line, obviously for financial reasons, we decided, oh no, we don't need clerk of works. Tell you what, we'll just sign off our own work. You're the client, I'm the contractor. I'll sign it off, saying it's all done. You'll say, yeah, I'm happy with that. That hasn't worked.
no,
Bring
no,
back the clerk of works, or bring back a more rigorous quality assurance process, which ties in with the Building Safety Act anyway.
yeah, yeah.
We've got to demonstrate stuff has been done properly.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And there are actually some really quite good camera systems, and to actually validate what's been built to the design. So technology has a
Right.
role to play here as well. I can see that happening. Probably more difficult in the electrical and the MEP environment, but certainly in some of the sort of the structural elements, probably quite effective. So Dave, I think we've set ourselves quite a challenge to change this industry.
Yeah, well, it's like how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a
The
time.
time, yeah. And hopefully sort of podcasts and videos like this will help at least get the message out there that you shouldn't be accepting work that you can't do, and you need to make sure that if the organisation you're in is working effectively, and
Definitely.
that's the law. So thank you very much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Bit worrying about some of the things you've got to say, but as you say, they need exposing and they need talking about. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks.